Primal sighed, his fur ruffling as he leaned back against the rock wall. "I don't have a family," he said. "Not anymore." He paused, his eyes distant, lost in a memory. "I was born here in the woods. My mother was a creature like me, but my father was human. They didn't live together, but he would visit sometimes. He taught me things, but people were afraid of me." Leela's hand hovered in the air for a moment before dropping back to her side. She felt a pang of sympathy for this creature, who was so clearly torn between two worlds. "What happened?" she asked softly. Primal's gaze dropped to the ground, his shoulders slumping. "My mother was taken," he said, his voice thick with pain. "Hunters. They didn't see her for what she was." He paused, his eyes misting over. "After that, my father wouldn't take care of me. He was too scared of what I might become, so he left me here, with only the woods as my teacher." Leela's eyes filled with tears at his story, and she reached out to touch his paw again, more gently this time. "I'm sorry," she said. "I can't imagine what that was like." Primal pushes her away, his eyes flashing with a fierce protectiveness. "You're safe here," his voice rumbling in the enclosed space. "Rest. I'll keep you." Exhaustion eventually overtakes Leela, and she succumbs to sleep, her head pillowed on a makeshift bed of furs. Primal keeps his vigil, his eyes flickering from the fire to the entrance of the cave. He can't shake the feeling that her presence here in his sanctuary has changed everything. He's never felt responsible for another being before, and the weight of it is both terrifying and exhilarating. When Leela opens her eyes, the cave looks different. The fire has been reduced to embers, casting a warm glow over everything. She sits up, her body feeling cleaner than it has in days. Looking down, she finds herself in a soft dress made from fabric she doesn't recognize. Her cuts and bruises from her ordeal are all looked after. The dirt that once clung to her skin has been replaced by a gentle scent of lavender and sage. Her gaze lands on Primal, who is still awake, his eyes never leaving the cave's entrance. He notices her movement and turns to look at her, his expression unreadable. "You're awake," he says, his voice a gentle rumble in the quiet. "What happened?" Her voice still thick with sleep. She looks down at herself, the soft fabric of the dress brushing against her skin. Primal nods towards the shower. "It works," he says. "It's a spring up in the mountains. I figured out how to channel the water here." Primal's eyes lit up as he started explaining, his voice carrying an unguarded excitement, like a child eager to share a newfound secret. "The shower, it works. See, there's this spring up in the mountains, like a magic fountain or something. I found it when I was exploring. It's so cool. I made these channels out of wood and stone, kinda like puzzle pieces, to bring the water here." He gestured animatedly, his hands mimicking the flow of water down the makeshift channels. "And the heating part, that's my favorite," he continued, his voice bubbling with enthusiasm. "I built this fire pit under the big stone. When the fire burns, it makes the stones all hot and toasty. The water flows over the hot stones and gets warm. It's like magic. Then I store the heated water in this big wooden tank. I even put moss and clay around it too." Primal led the way to the shower area, pointing to the various parts with pride. Look, I made these pipes from branches. They're hollow inside. The warm water travels through them and comes out here, he said, indicating the wooden shower head. You just twist this handle and whoosh, warm water, just like in the stories. His eyes sparkled with a mixture of pride and childlike wonder as he finished his explanation. I figured it all out by myself. It's like the forest helped me, you know. Everything just fits together perfectly. It's amazing what you can do with the things nature gives you. Leela stared at him, bewildered by his enthusiasm. But if you have this amazing cave shower, why are you as dirty as the ground itself? She asked, her confusion evident. Leela's eyes widened with amazement. Can I try it? She asks hesitantly. Primal nods, a hint of pride in his posture. Of course, he says, gesturing to the shower. Just pull that. Leela stands and approaches the shower, dropping the fabric, her movements more graceful than any creature Primal has ever seen. She glances back, a playful smirk playing on her lips, and pulls the lever. Water cascades down, and she steps under the flow, her eyes closing in pleasure. Primal watches, his breath hitching in his throat as the water runs over her body, revealing her smooth skin and curves that had been hidden beneath the dirt and grime. He feels a strange, unfamiliar stirring in his chest and a heat that has nothing to do with the fire. He clears his throat, his voice gruff. Why are you doing this? He asks, his eyes never leaving her. Leela opens her eyes, the water streaming down her face like tears. Doing what? She asks. Primal's gaze is intense, his voice gruff. This, you're teasing me. Leela blinks, the water running down her face in rivulets. What? No, she protests, but her cheeks flush a deep pink. She tries to cover herself, her hands shaking. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Primal's eyes narrow, his curiosity piqued. What do you mean, you're sorry? His voice is gruff, his body tensing with confusion and something he doesn't quite understand. Leela steps out from under the shower, the water still cascading around her. She wraps the hide around herself, the fabric clinging to her curves as she turns to face him. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable, she says, her voice small. It's just that I haven't had anyone to talk to in a long time, and you're the first person I've seen in days. Primal's gaze is torn between the fire and the girl before him. He can't help but feel a strange attraction, an urge to protect her and be close to her, even though she's human. Why are you here? Leela takes a deep breath, her eyes meeting his. I told you I was running, but I didn't tell you why, she admits, her voice shaky. I was a sex worker. Those bikers, they were clients. They didn't like that I didn't want to go through with it anymore. They said I owed them. Primal's eyes widen with a mix of understanding and confusion. He had never encountered such terms or concepts in his life in the woods, but he could sense the fear and pain in Leela's voice, and that was enough to ignite a protective instinct within. I don't know what a sex worker is, he admits, his voice gentle but firm. But I can see that those men have hurt you, and that makes me angry. They won't find you here, he promises, his voice dropping to a low growl. The fur on his back rises slightly, a reflection of his rising anger and determination. I will protect you, Primal continues, his eyes meeting Leela's with unwavering resolve. This forest is my home. Leela feels a mix of relief and gratitude. Despite the differences in their worlds, she knows she has found a protector in Primal. She tightens the hide around her and steps closer, finding solace in his presence. Thank you, she whispers, her eyes downcast. The tension in the cave is palpable, a silent dance of attraction and fear. Primal turns away, trying to compose himself, his mind racing with thoughts he's never had before. He's aware of her every movement as she dries herself, the soft patter of the water echoing in the small space. When she's finished, Leela approaches him, the hide wrapped tightly around her body. I'm sorry, she says again, her voice small and apologetic. I didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable. Primal nods, his eyes never leaving hers. It's not you, he murmurs, his voice thick with something she doesn't understand. It's just, I've never been around anyone like you before. Get dressed. Leela takes a step closer, her hand hovering over his messy hair. You should shower too, she says gently. You'll feel better. Primal's eyes narrow, and before she knows it, he has pushed her to the ground, his paws pinning her down. A quiet, he commands, his voice a harsh whisper. Stay here. He grabs his wolf headgear, a knife, his fur sack, and some supplies. With his heart pounding, he rushes out of the cave. His instincts scream at him to protect her, to keep her safe from the humans that had hurt her, and from the ones that would come looking. The night air was cool and still, with the scent of the girl's fear following him like an invisible trail. Primal moved swiftly through the forest, his ears twitching as he listened for any sign of the bikers. The forest was his ally, whispering secrets only he could hear. The distant sound of engines grew louder, a menacing growl that made his back rise. He knew they were coming, and he wouldn't let them get near her. The thought of Leela in danger fueled his determination. Primal sprinted through the underbrush, his powerful legs devouring the distance with ease. His eyes seemed to glow with fierce determination, and the trees seemed to part for him as he ran. The scent of gasoline and leather drifted on the wind, mingling with Leela's fear, a beacon that guided him back to her. As he distanced himself from the cave, he slowed, his breaths coming in quiet, controlled pants. He crouched low, peering out into the clearing. His nose twitched, catching the unmistakable scent of gasoline and leather. The bikers were close, their engines a growling menace in the night. He counted them, all armed and looking more dangerous than any creature he'd faced before. His mind raced as he tried to come up with a plan to protect Leela. The instinct to flee battled with his newfound desire to protect her. He couldn't let fear dictate his actions. Not now. Primal had to make his way back to the cave after scouting for the bikers. Clutching his supplies, he cautiously stepped. The forest seemed to close in around him as he moved stealthily, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to be sure the path was clear before he could return to Leela. Satisfied that the immediate area was safe, Primal quickly made his way back to the cave. He entered quietly, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of danger. He found Leela where he had left her, her eyes wide with worry. He turned to Leela, his eyes a mix of fierce protection and regret. "You have to go," he whispered, his voice a low rumble. "They are looking for you, and if they find you here—" He didn't finish the sentence, the unspoken threat hanging in the air like smoke. He could see the fear in her eyes, mirroring his own. Leela's face paled, but she nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. She tightened the hide around herself, her eyes darting around the cave for any escape route. Primal's eyes softened as he looked at her. "I'll create a diversion," he said, his voice firmer now. "Follow the path to the east. It will lead you to a hidden trail. Stay low and move quickly." She hesitated for a moment, then stepped closer, her eyes searching his. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. Primal nodded, feeling a surge of protectiveness. He would do whatever it took to keep her safe. As she slipped out of the cave and into the night, the fabric he gave her like a ghost in the wind fluttered as she ran. Crouched low, he moved silently through the underbrush, positioning himself between the cave and the bikers. The engines grew louder, the growling machines tearing through the night. Primal bared his teeth, his muscles coiled and ready. The forest was his domain, and tonight he would show these intruders the fury of a guardian. Her eyes widen with fear, but she nods, understanding the gravity of the situation. She moves quickly, gathering her thoughts and slipping into the shadows of the woods. Primal watches her, his heart aching. He's never remembered feeling this way before, the need to keep someone safe burning like a wildfire in his chest. The bikers' voices grow louder as they enter the clearing, their laughter cutting through the night. Primal's fur stands on end, his teeth bared in a silent snarl. He knows he can't take them alone, but he can't abandon her either. He watches them from the shadows, his eyes glinting in the moonlight. They're searching, their flashlights piercing the darkness like predators hunting their prey. Her eyes are wide with terror. He watches as she retreats further into the shadows of the woods, the last sliver of moonlight painting her features with a soft glow before she's swallowed by darkness. Primal takes one last look at her, his mind racing with a fierce need to keep her safe. He turns his gaze to his paws, flexing the powerful digits. His teeth are equally deadly, and he imagines sinking them into the thick neck of one of the bikers. The thought sends a shiver down his spine, not from fear, but from the primal instinct to fight, to defend what's his. But these are humans, with their strange rules and weapons that could end his life with a single shot. He takes a deep breath, pushing down the urge to charge into the night and tear them apart. His mind races as he considers his options. He can't outrun them, not with his size and their machines. He can't outfight them, not with their numbers and firepower. But he can use the woods to his advantage, leading them on a wild goose chase that will leave them lost and disoriented. Primal moved swiftly through the underbrush, his senses heightened as he searched for Leela. The scent of her fear lingered in the air, guiding him like an invisible thread. He knew she was hiding somewhere close, and he needed to find her before the bikers did.